Hello, welcome back to my channel. My name is Carly Stevens. I'm a teacher and author, and this is English Nerd. Today we're continuing in the Inferno All About series, specifically Cantos 12 and 13. I will warn you ahead of time that there is some difficult content in Canto 13. Cantos 12 and 13 are all about the violent. Canto 12 is about the violent against others. Canto 13 is about those violent against themselves. So if you are particularly sensitive to those kinds of topics, then just be aware that that's coming up, or you can turn this off altogether. I'll do my best to deal with these really difficult topics with tact, but these are not the cantos that I look forward to teaching every year. Although there are some really interesting things to think about if we can kind of detach ourselves. So anyway, with that really cheery intro, let's talk about Dante's Inferno. So last time I talked about Cantos 9, 10, and 11, which is when Dante and Virgil go through the Gate of Dis. They meet a couple of heretics, and then they get past that sixth circle, and they pause to talk about the order of the rest of the Inferno, like what Dante the character can expect going forward. So once they've acclimated to that stench rising from the lower part of hell, they continue on, and we get to Canto 12, which is the beginning of the violent section. Now, right off the bat, the violent circle is split up into three. This is the first time we've seen something like this. There have been circles, notably Circle 4 and Circle 5, that have more than one group of people in those sections, but this is actually subcategorized into entirely different environments that all still count as, in this case, Circle 7. We'll see that continue to be the case. So, Canto 12, Dante and Virgil are headed to Circle 7 with the violent, but the guardian of that circle is the Minotaur. We've seen this before. Different monsters, different mythological creatures guard different sections, like Plutus guarding Circle 4, for example. So the Minotaur is a really famous mythological figure, half man, half bull, who is part of the myth of the king of Minos and the labyrinth and all these things that many people are familiar with already if you've studied mythology. So the Minotaur is full of this rage, and Virgil, to get past the Minotaur, is actually kind of brilliant. He mocks the Minotaur. He says, how you pump your breath, did you think that you could get out of this? And it says, as a bull, this is line 21 or so, as a bull that breaks its chains just when the knife has struck its death blow, cannot stand nor run, but leaps from side to side with its last life, so danced the Minotaur. And my shrewd guide cried out, "Run now while he's blind with rage, into the pass quick and get over the side." There is a lot of symbolism going on with the Minotaur, reflecting the circle that he's guarding. Just like Plutus, the god of wealth, reflected the obsession with wealth that everyone in Circle 4 had. Here, the Minotaur is not only a creature that is so angry that he can't even see straight, he can't understand really what's happening around him, but also he's half man, half animal, and we're going to see that that is a typical feature of the creatures in all of Circle 7. So I'll explain that a bit more when we see more of that. So off they go, and Virgil and Dante look out and see a river of boiling blood, which is just gross, but it's something that we would kind of expect to see in this hellscape, right? There is the Acheron River right up front in order to get into hell. There is the Styx, which is swampy but still considered a river. which is also circle 5. And then this is the third river that we've come across. It's called the Fledge-A-Thon or the Fledge-A-Thon. I'm not entirely sure if it's a hard or a soft G. But this is the boiling river of blood that is circle 7. Runs through circle 7. In addition to there being that river, there's also there are also centaurs that have bows and arrows that are galloping along on either bank of this boiling blood river. So it's a striking image of the violent. Centaurs, of course, are half horse and half animal. We're going to see one more type of mythological creature in the next section, the next canto, but here's as good a time as any to talk about why it seems pretty clear to me Dante uses these half man, half man, half animal creatures here in particular. You think about the previous creatures, and you have Cerberus, for example. He's all beast, and Minos, he was incredibly strange, not really half and half, but this unholy mashup of things. Here we have consistently half man, half bull, half man, half horse, and then we're going to see half woman, half bird later on. This is because of the nature of the people here in this circle. They're all violent, so they give in to their more animalistic tendencies. In Dante's day, there was this idea of the great chain of being, how everything had its place in this vast hierarchy that started with God at the top, of course, being the most important, the most actualized, the best in every sense, going all the way down to nothingness at the bottom, which of course has none of those things. So in between, you would have the angels, you'd have animals, you'd have plants, you'd have this whole group, but humans were the only ones that had one foot in the physical and one in the spiritual, being bodies with souls. So we were the only ones that kind of crossed that XY axis of spiritual and physical, and we were the only ones who, through our own choices, could go up or down that scale as well. We could become more like the angels depending on how we acted, or we could become more like beasts. And so Dante is saying that these people have chosen to become so much like beasts, to give up that higher part of their natures, that it's as though they've become half beast, half human. So that's the deal with those creatures. In particular, we meet a couple of centaurs. There's Chiron, who famously taught Achilles and some of the other great Greek heroes their war skills and things like that. There's Nessus, who is part of a pretty dreadful story involving Hercules and Nessus being violent in a variety of ways. I'm sure you can see that footnote. It's not something that I spent time on in class, because I'm more interested in these souls in the contrapasso and that kind of thing. So where are the souls in all of this? We've only seen the blood river. We've seen the centaurs. They are in the river of blood. So line 73 says that the centaurs run by that stream in thousands, snapping their bows at any wraith who dares to raise himself out of the blood more than his guilt allows. So this introduces the idea that depending on the level of the sinner's violence, they have to be in the river up to a certain point. So you'd have somebody like Stalin, right? And then you'd have somebody who killed one person, maybe just splashing around with their ankles in this very low level of the stream. Toward the end of this canto, Dante learns that the river does actually get deeper and shallower depending on where you are in the circle. I forget if I mentioned this, but this is a decent place to talk about it again, just in case. I told you that, and you've read that Achilles, the great Greek hero, is in circle 2 with the lustful. And I talked a little bit about that. it seems to me that this would be a much more logical place for him to be. If you've read the Iliad, then you know what I'm talking about. But how Dante splits this up is that, of course, most people aren't going to just commit one sin in their lifetime. All of us do a variety of things at different points. It's what characterizes the person's life the most. So what was it that really encompassed the rest of their actions? You know, the most habitual or that sort of thing. So here you have people who were violent just fundamentally and intentionally. This is important as well. We already saw the wrathful who were fighting each other in Circle 5. Those people just did not have control over their anger. They were consumed by anger and then they would lash out. Here we have people who are intentionally violent, maliciously violent against others with this intentionality that is lacking in upper hell. So there's that. We run into a few famous people here who are mentioned. Dante doesn't really he talks to the centaurs, but he doesn't talk to any of the sinners in the river. He sees Alexander the Great, he sees Attila the Hun, and he sees Pyrrhus, who killed Priam in the fall of Troy, for example. So he sees all these people and understands that the level of their punishment depends on the level of their violence. It's straightforward enough that he basically just continues on. He gets across the river with the help of Nessus, and that closes out the canto. Pretty straightforward. And the contrapasso, the eye for an eye, how does it match? Oh gosh, I forgot to mention this in the last video with the heretics. They thought that the soul died with the body, so now they're in those tombs. Well, dagnabbit. Here, the contrapasso is very clear. You have those who are violent and the blood of those they slew, basically. Okay, and then comes Canto 13, which is the difficult one. So, as I mentioned, the violent circle is split up. It's split up specifically into 3 sections. This shouldn't come as much of a surprise because we've seen so many 3s already. All of the stanzas are broken up into 3 lines. It's part of a 3-part work, etc. So, violent against others, that was the first section with the centaurs. This is violent against self. And then next time we'll see violent against God, which needs a lot of explanation. There are a lot of different types of people in there. It's another section that I don't love to talk about exactly. And in my school, the assistant principal always just randomly stops in. It's not planned. It's not because I'm talking about these things, but he'll pop in just at different times during the day. Or, it'll go a week and then he'll pop in. He always comes in when I'm talking about one of these tough ones. Which is fine. He needs to know what's going on in the classroom, but it's like year after year. Come on. There's a lot of other stuff to see. All right, so here we go. Violent against self. Do what you need to do to protect yourself as I talk about this next bit, because I know it's a sensitive topic and it's a complicated topic and it's not one that's fun to talk about in terms of the Inferno, but here we go. All right, Canto 13. There's a whole new environment, just like there is between different circles. There are between these sections of Circle 7 as well. It was the Fledge-A-Thon, the river of blood before. Now they enter into this dark wood. It's these warped and tangled trees. They're nearly black. There isn't a lot of growth on them. Now, immediately, this should make you think, or at least it reminds me of the dark wood at the beginning of the story. I found myself alone in the dark wood, for the straight way was lost, right at the beginning. And the way that forest is described in the very first canto is as something so terrifying and so savage and so hopeless that it seems pretty clear to me, although I've mentioned that there are other interpretations here, that Dante would place himself, the character, had he died without this redemptive journey, in this section. I think he was at a place personally at the beginning of the story when he was seriously considering this self-harm. And as I was preparing for this video, I saw a couple of commentators note that there's a word in Italian that means lost or confused that is used in that first canto right at the beginning and is used here as well. And it's, I guess, not that common of a word because more than one translator noted that maybe we're supposed to make this connection between his state at the beginning and where he would have ended up had Beatrice not sent help immediately. Also, Beatrice says at the beginning, I'm afraid I'm too late, and Dante's only 35, so why would she be too late unless he were going to do something drastic and end up here? Okay, so here we go. This is sometimes referred to as the Wood of the Suicides, in depending on the translation. So that is where we find ourselves. And it's harpies, half woman, half bird monsters who are feeding on these trees, that are squawking, that are guarding this section. And I just talked about why that makes sense with the half creature, half human. Okay, so Dante is confused at first because he doesn't see any souls. It's just these trees. And he hears sighs, but that's about it. Then Virgil, I'm a big fan of Virgil, generally speaking, but Virgil says, why don't you break off a twig and then all your questions will be answered. Break off a twig from this tree that's right here. I'm going to read this. This is Canto 13, line 31. Puzzled, I raised my hand a bit and slowly broke off a branchlet from an enormous thorn. And the great trunk of it cried, "Why do you break me?" And after blood had darkened all the bowl of the wound, it cried again, "Why do you tear me? Is there no pity left in any soul?" My gosh. So with this big reveal, we find out that the souls are actually encased in these trees, that they don't have bodies in a traditional sense, but instead this is how they exist. And the way that they can speak is through their wounds, which is an additional interesting allegorical element. So when Dante breaks that branch off and it starts to bleed, it's through that the tree is finally able to have this voice. Obviously, we can go into the contrapasso of that, how it matches in a way what these people did in life, how they spoke they spoke their pain out of the way that they harmed themselves. And also the fact that they're trees, because they discarded their bodies, they destroyed their bodies, they are not granted them in death. Dante later learns that they will get them after the final judgment day. They'll get their bodies, but they won't really be able to use them. It's really a sobering canto. I've had some really good discussions with my classes about the contrapasso here. The insightful things that they've come up with and the tactful way that they've handled this topic have just impressed me year after year. If you're teaching this, then you know your students. You wouldn't do that with every group necessarily, but it's amazing what people can get out of some of this. All right, so there are two different people that Dante speaks to here. There's one anonymous guy from Florence that is at the end, but more notably there's Pierre De La Vina, again with the Italian names, I'm doing my best, who was a high-up official with Frederick II, Emperor Frederick II. Pierre De La Vina was accused of treason after enjoying a couple years of basically stardom in the court. He was tortured and he ended his own life after that. Now, just before I go any further, just a couple things. I know that this is not a simple issue. It's not the same as ending the life of someone else. There are much more complicated psychological issues that go into this kind of harm. However, if you kill another person, if I murder you, then I've destroyed someone valuable. I deserve to, be punished for that action. If I harm myself, if you harm yourself, then you also are harming someone valuable. And so I don't say this to shame anybody, but I think it's important to recognize that you are just as valuable as the person next to you, as the rest of your family and your friends and, the celebrities that you see, that you have just as much worth. And so it's no small thing to destroy yourself. Secondly, there is a lot of help out there for people who do struggle with these impulses and these thoughts, and those who feel trapped, as Pierre De La Vina did. So I'm going to put some resources down below, and you can text or call or otherwise get connected with people who can help you and will not see you as a burden, but instead will be happy that you reached out on your own behalf, that you had the courage to do that. All right, so going back to the very end of this, there's not much more that I want to discuss, but Dante hears the story of this man. He's overcome with compassion, just like he was at the beginning of the Inferno. It's not that his attitude changes with Filippo Argenti in Circle 5 and just stays that way the entire time. It really depends on the person that he's talking to, and here he does have compassion. And I think, I mean, to me it seems like rightly so. Perhaps Dante the poet would disagree, but he writes this so tenderly that I think he might. Before we get to the actual ending, there is one other group that rushes by, and it's this bizarre moment of people who do have bodies who are being chased by these kind of hellhound things. And this small subset of people, in those who are violent against themselves, did not harm their physical bodies, but instead wasted all of their stuff. There was a trend when Dante was living where people would not just waste their stuff. We already saw those people right in the wasters section, but they would do so in this violent, destructive manner that really changed their lives for the worst. It was very self-destructive. So think about the Joker in The Dark Knight just burning that pile of money. The wealthy in particular would set their homes on fire, things like that were intentional and violent and harmed themselves, but in this secondary way. So those are the random people who run by. Happily, we don't have too much of that going on these days. But yeah, that wraps up Cantos 12 and 13. Do check out those resources down below. Like this video if you like it. Don't forget to subscribe for more English nerdy goodness. Get Laertes if you're a classic literature fan, the Hamlet retelling from Laertes' point of view. And I will see you very soon.